When you hear Sonic Colors, what comes to mind? It's likely the one released on the Wii or the remaster, Sonic Colors Ultimate. I've seen debates online about whether Colors is a good game, or how parts of it left a negative impact on the series during the 2010s, but I've rarely seen anyone give any mention to the other version of the game on Nintendo's handheld at the time, the DS. Unlike the Wii version that was made by Sonic Team, this version was developed by Dimps, who also developed the two Rush games for the handheld. If you had to pick between the console version of a game and the handheld version, you'd probably think console version, of course, as handheld versions of games are often regarded as watered-down versions of their console counterparts. This isn't the case with Colors, and while you could easily play both versions today, what if you just had to pick one? I'll be comparing both games and then give my opinion on which one I prefer. Let's get right into it. Both games generally share the same plot. Dr. Eggman builds an amusement park in space and says it's an apology for his past actions. Big surprise, the amusement park was a front for a mind control ray, and Eggman was using a race of aliens called the Wisp to power it. After saving the Wisp, Sonic defeats Eggman and the day is saved. That's the story of Sonic Colors wrapped in a nice little blanket. If they are the same plot, why would I even mention it? It's more about how the dialogue is presented, and this is one of the more controversial aspects of Colors. Colors was the first game in the series written by Ken Pontac and Warren Graff, and they took Sonic in a more comedic direction. The Wii version is filled with jokes like baldy nose hair and an order of clobbering that only a little kid would find funny. I know how dumb it sounds to be criticizing the jokes of a series whose target demographic is children, but these jokes really fall flat on their face. If only a version of Sonic Colors that didn't have this horrible attempt at comedy. Wait a minute, that does exist! It's Colors DS's story. In DS, the game doesn't even try to make you laugh, it simply tells a story, which isn't that bad, albeit basic. It also introduces different short side stories, although I use the term story lightly because each of these could easily be summed up in a sentence or two. These short stories can be found in the various side missions throughout the game, and what's cool about them is that they feature other members of the cast, unlike the Wii version that only has Sonic and Tails. It's not just characters like Amy and Knuckles, but also other characters like Omega from Team Dark or Charmy from the Chaotix. Their interactions are brief, but it's nice to see the extended cast just doing their thing. Since I mentioned the missions, I should probably get into the game itself. Colors Wii plays similarly to Sonic Unleashed. You boost your way through levels while switching between controlling Sonic in a 3D and 2D plane. The notable change being you can't manually drift or sidestep, as the game allowed for the Wii mode to be used on its side, so that meant Sonic Team had to cram the moveset into a smaller set of buttons. Colors DS is more in line with the Rush series. You also boost your stages, but you're stuck to being in 2D due to hardware limitations, of course. There are two things that don't carry over from the Rush series, the trick system and a playable Blaze. For Blaze, it makes sense, as this is Sonic Colors, but the removal of the trick system is confusing. I don't mind it being gone, but it's still a strange omission since it was cool to see how many tricks you could pull before landing. Despite both gameplay styles being distinct from one another, they both share one obvious thing, the Wisp. The Wisp provides Sonic with temporary abilities that are meant to help him get through the acts. At least, most of them are, looking at YouTube. Some Wisps are exclusive to each version. The Red and Violet Wisps are exclusive to the DS. The Red Wisp gives Sonic the ability to burst into the air, while the Violet Wisp turns him into a black hole that can fly and suck in enemies. These two are pretty solid as they keep the fast pace going. If only I could say the same thing for most of Wii's Wisp. Colors Wii has the green, blue, purple, and pink Wisp. The pink Wisp lets you stick to walls and spin dash. Spike is not too bad, but the others are Purple Wisp lets you eat most things in your path, but it's mindless since all you do is go forward. Although I guess you could argue the Violet Wisp serves the same purpose, so it's pretty inoffensive. The green Wisp lets you hover in the air, but it floats so slowly that it kinda blows. At the very least, it doesn't cut the pace as much as the blue Wisp. This Wisp lets you switch the blue blocks to blue rings, and vice versa, while stopping you in your tracks. The blue Wisp is easily the worst out of the bunch, since it feels like a hassle when you use it. Well, there's the blue blocks. Guess I have to use Cube. Yippee. That's enough about the Wisp. What about those levels you use them in? Although both versions share the same world themes, their act structures are different. Colors Wii has 6 acts with a boss. It feels more like 2 or 3 acts, because some of them feel more like side content. No joke, some of these acts can be completed in less than a minute. It feels like Sonic Team was like, ah shoot, the game is too short, quick, throw some levels together, and this are the results. That didn't really change anything because I beat the game in just under 3 hours. Colors DS is even shorter if you only do the required levels, but his method of structuring acts succeeds a lot more. For each area, there are only 2 main acts and a boss. You may think that this is bad as there are less levels, but these levels have enough meat on their bones to stand against the 6th act of Wii. The bosses in both games are not challenging in the slightest, since you can use the Wisp to completely curb stomp them. Each boss type is reused twice, with some doing a good job changing things up, while others are quite literally feel like the same thing. I would say DS handles the bosses better. For example, Tropical Resort's boss only requires you to hit the hands and the head. Planet Wisp, on the other hand, requires you to destroy these weak points to stop it from regenerating health. It took a previous boss and built upon its foundation. That's good. Now let's look at those exact same areas, but in the Wii version. Planet Wisp doesn't have flat platforms, Pink Wisp is used instead of the Cyan Wisp, and there are some lasers. These changes honestly don't change the fight that much, and you could beat both bosses in under 30 seconds. I wish Wii's bosses had a bit more changes added to them, or each area was given its own unique boss. Talking about levels again, there are also those side missions I mentioned earlier. There are a total of 3 per area. These are small challenges that ask you to do stuff like get X number of rings or beat X number of robots. They are completely optional, so if you only want to play the main act, you can avoid them. But are those main acts good? Yes! Looking at the 2 acts from DS and the 2 or 3 acts from Wii, I would say they are mostly solid, although there is one major issue I want to talk about. Some levels in both games have these segments where you aren't doing much. For example, in Starlight Carnival on Wii, the game plays itself in the beginning of Act 1. As for DS, there's this part in Asteroid Coaster where you just jump between different seats. It's kind of a weak gameplay element. Overall, they offer a decent balance of platforming and speed, although I do want to mention something about Wii's acts. I mentioned earlier that it is mixed 2D and 3D together. I heard people say Colors is more of a 2D game than a 3D game, and I can see where that sentiment comes from. The game as a whole felt like 70% 2D and 30% 3D. Heck, some acts are 100% 2D. This is a far cry from the stages presented in Sonic Unleashed that I think presented a good blend of the 2 styles, although this was likely due to having a chunk of the game dedicated to the Werehog. When you have to make a game using only Blue Sonic, it makes sense to use mostly 2D, considering how much level design you would have to make for one 3D level. With that out of the way, how are the graphics and sound? I'm not going to be directly comparing the two as it would be so unfair. Obviously Colors Wii would win by a landslide. Instead, I'm going to be seeing how well they look and sound for their hardware. Colors Wii looks fantastic. The environments are colorful and the models are a step up from Sonic Team's previous work on the Wii, Sonic and the Black Knight. That game didn't look bad, but comparing Black Knight to Colors, it's night and day. Starlight Carnival and Tropical Resort are excellent showcases. The music is also great, with Planet Wisp and Terminal Velocity being my favorite. I can't name any tracks in this game that I would consider mediocre. They're just that good. I have similar things to say about the DS version as well. The sprite work for the environments and enemies are nice to look at, and they blend nicely with Sonic's 3D model. I like how Sonic looks on DS. He has a sort of cute look to him. DS probably could have simply used compressed versions of the songs from the Wii, but they instead made their own versions of the songs. They also sound great. Everything looks good on that front, but there's one thing I forgot to mention that really stands out between the 2 versions, and it involves the Chaos Emeralds. On console, you get the Chaos Emeralds by completing all the Game Land stages, which are gradually unlocked by collecting the Red Ring. Once you do that, you unlock Super Sonic, and I didn't know this until like 3 or 4 years ago, but this was the first Sonic game in 3D that let you play a Super Sonic outside of the final boss. That must have been mind-blowing back in 2010. As for DS, you get the Emeralds by playing special stages, which are accessed by finishing a stage with at least 50 rings. It's the half pipe, but since these stages use the DS's touchscreen, they are easy. That does make them a bit boring, but it sure beats them being frustratingly difficult. Once you get them all, you unlock a boss that isn't in the console version, Nega Mother Wisp. DS gave Colors a supersonic fight. This is a pretty cool addition to the game. After you defeat her, she is revealed to be Mother Wisp, and she actually makes a few cameos after this game. With all the comparisons complete, I believe that the DS version of Sonic Colors offers a more fulfilling Colors experience. This is due to some of my previously mentioned points. Colors DS is more concise with its length, and as a secret boss fight, it offers a slightly better challenge, which is something Wii lacks. Not saying it's a big leap, but it's enough to keep you more engaged. The game also doesn't have too many segments compared to the Wii version, where you have to awkwardly platform. I say awkward because Blue Sonic has the reputation of not controlling well when not moving quickly, and that rings true here for both games. As you collect red rings, you also unlock music tracks and an art gallery. Those may not be much considering you can find the art online in a higher resolution, but if you had no access to the internet when this game came out like me, it was a neat bonus. The game is a tightly knit package in my eyes. There's just something I just want to make clear. Here's some background. My first gaming device ever was the Nintendo DS. I was a little kid, so I can't remember what games I got first, but eventually I got my hands on my first Sonic game, that obviously being Sonic Colors. This game alongside Sonic X got me into the series. There may or may not be any bias in my opinion considering this was my first game into the series. I'll let you decide, but this game isn't even in my top 5 Sonic games, so who knows. Besides, no one said you could only play one version. That was only a hypothetical situation. I recommend you give both a playthrough as they are great games that stand on their own. I know it may seem I didn't enjoy my time with Colors Wii considering how critical I was of it during this video, but I had a good time with it and I didn't feel like I wasted my time. If you can, I recommend playing the Wii version with an HD texture pack, which will be linked in the description below. There's also a link on how to get 60 FPS instead of the game's normal 30. For the DS version, there is a widescreen hack which allows you to have Sonic only on one screen instead of him switching between 2 screens if you're interested in that. With all that said, hope you enjoyed this little comparison. Feel free to share which version of Colors you prefer. This is Adam, speaking with my heart, signing off. Peace. Also, the only reason 100% of the DS version isn't canon is because Sonic only calls Eggman Baldy Nose here in the Wii version and that name is referenced in Lost World. We were this close to making only one version canon, but oh well. Anyways, I just wanted to say that. Bye.